boast not against the branches. It's a defense of God's everlasting covenant with Israel. So I'm teased it a little bit on Sunday, or maybe 2 weeks ago on Sunday. That was an interesting Sunday for me, in a good way. It was baby dedications, the last two of that class, and there was a ton of visitors. And I said something, and some guy, and I'm not going to point to where he was sitting in case he's related to you, but I always get a kick out of this. But I said something, and sometimes I'm fishing, you know what I mean? So I'll say something that I know could easily be taken the wrong way, and then I just start looking, like you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, you know the one you hit, right? So I just throw stuff out there sometimes. It's not true. It is true, but it's not typically what people hear. And I just happened to look at this guy right in his face, and he was about to come out of his chair, man. And I love stuff like that. I think what I said in that particular instance was that the church isn't here for evangelism. And for the last, 100 years maybe, the church has been utilized as a tool for evangelism and not, which you could say, well, what could be possibly wrong with that? People need to get saved. They do. And there's a gift for that, and there's a plan for that. It's called Go Ye Therefore, and make disciples. So go and, there's a gift of evangelism, but there's also, other gifts. And the church, and some would argue, and I'm kind of in the middle on this. This, by the way, has nothing to do with my message tonight. But the church, some would say, is for believers, because this is where discipleship should be happening. And out there is where evangelism should be happening, right? So what has happened over time is the church has become, I remember Stephen Furtick one time said, if you're saved, this church isn't for you, because it's just, basically what he was saying is just for unbelievers to get saved. Well, what you have in those cases, I went to a church like that for a long time, you don't have any maturity at all sitting out here. Very little. The first 3 rows are your people. But everybody else, they're getting saved every week. Everybody they know that they bring is getting saved every week. Nobody knows anything, couldn't rub 2 scriptures together if they had to, but they come every week, because if they don't, they might backslide. And so it's a backhanded way to pack the church, but you're really not doing anything but just, you have a form of godliness, but you deny the power. Because the power of the gospel is discipleship. Because when you get a disciple, then that person's going to go and they're going to preach everywhere they go. But when people are tethered to the altar because, I don't know, I got to get saved every week. I flipped somebody off this week, or whatever. It's an ingrown form of Christianity that's not even close to what it's supposed to be. So I said that, and I got a reaction. I was waiting to see if I got any comments or, if I heard through the grapevine, because I love to sit with people and talk about these things, but I didn't. So, and they weren't here last week, so it's all good. They'll be back around next time there's a family function, and we'll get them again. All right, let's talk about this. I mentioned this the other day. In fact, on that Sunday, I talked about Israel. And I talked about people who are coming against Israel. So first of all, let's just decide nobody's going to get offended tonight. If you love Tucker Carlson more than Jesus, I still love you. Don't get mad at me. If you love Candace Owens or all these, Nick Fuentes or all these anti-Jew people, it's going to work out for you as long as you're saved. And on the way to heaven, you'll figure it out. You'll nail it. You'll have it nailed before you get to heaven. I used to tell people that if there's not enough time here for you to understand the pre-trib rapture, I'll explain it to you on the way. I don't believe people miss it because they don't believe it. I think people are pleasantly surprised, like most aspects of the gospel. So, the modern conversation about Israel often focuses on Israel's behavior, like a lot of conversations in church. I sent the boys a little snippet of a video this week that was a pastor of a church. Looked like it was, pretty nice one. And he's talking about how, essentially you're judged on your behavior. You're not judged on the Ten Commandments in one aspect. I forget what that aspect was. You're going to be judged on what do you remember what it was? On how well you do these or something like that. Yeah, there you go. Not how much you know, but how much you obey. And I'm like, wow. I usually don't go in on somebody on their comments because, I don't care that much. But there were no comments yet. So I was the first one. And man, I just in love, I loved to do it. But in love, I just said, wow, after everything Jesus did, we get judged on our behavior. I find that hard to believe. Anyway, let me not digress. But we look at Israel, and if you think of people, these pundits, the reason they're coming against Israel is a couple of things. But number one, they think that Israel runs the world, okay, so there's that. But also they think that Israel, their behavior isn't such that we ought to be supportive of them. Compared to what? Everybody else in the Middle East? It's hard for me to even grasp any kind of substance in that argument. It's like we're talking about a democracy in the midst of savages and murderers and all these things. And so if you don't believe me, and I'm not talking about individual people. There was a Muslim guy that changed my blowout on the bridge coming into West Memphis, otherwise known as Little Beirut, the other night. Super nice kid. Went to, I don't think he was a Christian, but he had gone to the Ethiopian church that Philip started, traditionally. We don't really know if it was Philip that started it, but it was called Philip's Church or whatever, Anyway, but listen to this. Can we put that, John, can you put that graphic up? Okay. No, not yet. I'll call for the map. Yeah, I'll actually have a sermon I'm going to preach shortly, and I'll be calling for that map then. But we're going to start with this. Okay, so some of these are years ago when you guys weren't even born yet, okay? The Nice attack, Muslim. The Paris attacks, Muslim. The shoe bomber, Muslim. The Orlando nightclub attack, if you remember that one, Muslim. The Beltway snipers way back in the 90s in D.C., Muslim. The Fort Hood shooter, a doctor, Muslim. The underwear bomber, Muslim. Westminster attack, Muslim. The 2005 Bali bombings, Muslim. The murder of Lee Rigby, Muslim. The USS Cole bombers under Clinton's presidency, Muslims. Let's go to the next slide. The London Bridge attack, Muslim. The Madrid train bombers, Muslim. Charlie Hebdo attacks on the newspaper in Paris, Muslim. The San Bernardino, California, right down the road from, right across the highway from our church at the time, Muslim. The Surabaya bombings, Muslim. The Minnesota mall stabbings, Muslim. The 7/7 bombers. The Moscow theater attackers, if you remember those guys, they were Chechnyan, Muslim. The Boston Marathon bombers, Muslim. The Ankara airport attack, Muslim. The Manchester arena bombing, Muslim. The Pan Am 103 Lockerbie bombing way back in the day, I think that was the 80s, Muslims. Yeah, let's not forget 9/11. I'm sure there was a Muslim in there somewhere working for the CIA. Fire doesn't melt steel. Hello. I went to school in Mississippi, and I know that. Okay. Wow, just a minute, yeah. So obviously there's a pattern here, right? So again, when people like Tucker Carlson defend, Muslim nations and say, oh, they're not that bad, how many, this doesn't even touch how many young girls are what's it called? Mutilated, circumcised, that's mutilation for them. How many young girls are forced into marriages? Even soldiers talk about in Iraq where all these Taliban soldiers had a Thursday boy, a little kid that they carried around with them that they all had sex with. Little boy. The Hamas, I think it was his son who came to America. Son of Hamas, I think is his book that he wrote. That's why he left Islam. He got raped by a family member. So these people are scumbags. All right. The ones that are, fundamentally crazy, I guess. I'll give some wiggle room, but how anybody that tolerates it is a scumbag. So they're all, scumbags. At least Christians will call it out and try to put an end to it. People who are civil and legitimate, they'll call it out. Robert Morris needs to be in prison. All these things, but you see, in that culture, they don't say anything, and I can't abide that. That's just nonsense. Okay, and neither can God, by the way. So, the question is not, is Israel worthy? Okay, just cut to the chase here. The question is God faithful to his word? So when we start talking about the church has taken the place of Israel, that's really what we're talking about here. It's called replacement theology. So once the church was born in Acts 2, around 2000 AD, then Israel was no longer relevant. That's the claim. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that they've lost their covenant just because they crucified Jesus. They rejected Christ. As has everybody in here at one time or other. So anyway, let's just go through this as quickly as we can. Number one, the Abrahamic covenant was declared everlasting. So Genesis 12. And we're just going to go 3 verses here. Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Pretty powerful. God calls Abraham and promises a nation, a land, and that he'll be a blessing to the world. Pretty amazing for a guy that, started off not doing what he was told. He said, get up from your father's house and go where I tell you. And he got up, but the first thing he did is bring his brother's son, a member of his father's house, and God still blessed him. So that's interesting to me. So notice this, that God doesn't say in this passage, well, let me not get ahead of myself. Let me go up to Genesis 17, 7 and 8. Okay? Genesis 17, 7 and 8. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generation for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants after you. Also I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, and as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Okay? So nowhere does he say here that the everlasting covenant is based on his behavior or his qualification. He's qualified by the testator, who is God. God has qualified him by this promise. Okay? So now, let's talk quickly about the covenant ceremony. And this is my assertion, you guys. I feel like people who are struggling with this concept of Israel and the church coexisting don't have a revelation of the Father. I'm around a ton of people that are highly refined in their theology, very professional in their theology, and I hear them talk about God a lot. Never, and I mean never, have I heard any of them talk about the Father. There's not a revelation of the Father, and that matters, because the way God chose to relate to you is as your Father. That's the new covenant promise, that we are his children, he is our Father. And a son is different than a servant. The servant can get fired. The son can't. The son and the servant work together. At the end of the day, the servant takes his money and leaves, and the son comes in, eats at the father's table, sits around the fireplace, and dreams about the future. There's a difference. And God wants you to know that you are his sonship, daughtership, however that applies to you. So that's the first thing. The second thing that these people don't have, and I'm talking about the Tucker Carlsons of the world, all these highfalutin, high-educated, nonsensical people taking money from Qatar. What they don't understand is blood covenant. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But God made a covenant with Israel. And we already heard that he called that an everlasting covenant. And when you understand covenant, and when you understand that God does everything through the power and permissions of covenant, well, it changes everything. Because this isn't just a bunch of rules and regulations. This is following a blood trail, if you will, if I could speak the language of my brethren here. And you could follow that blood trail. In fact, there's a great book by Michael Booker, I believe his name is, or Richard Booker, called The Miracle of the Scarlet Thread. And it takes the blood covenant promise of the blood through every book of the Bible. It traces through every single book and culminates in its fulfillment in Jesus shed blood on the cross. That's the basis. And so when people don't understand that that's the basis of what is happening here, and it's not just a newfangled way to enforce the Ten Commandments, if you will, or just behavior modification, they miss the boat. And the third thing that people who are on that side of things don't understand is grace. They don't understand grace at all. And grace, the idea that we are recipients of unmerited favor in every regard has gotten me kicked out of more Christian churches than you would even believe. And if you stay around this long enough, you'll have the same experience. And that's really, it's an honorable thing, in my opinion. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about this covenant ceremony that we find in Genesis 15, okay? This is, again, the book, The Miracle of the Scarlet Thread. I used that. I taught in a Bible college many years ago, and I taught blood covenant, and we used that book. I taught that class for 6 years, and it was always really the student body favorite because it's so empowering. The revelation of that is just so powerful. So let's go to Genesis 15, and we'll start in verse 17. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between the pieces. And on the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Now take a look at this picture. We've got a diagram of that promise. Remember, that's the promise God made Abraham as he, and I'm going to walk back through this ceremony that they did in just a moment. But take a look at this. These are the borders that God promised in Genesis 15. Now you look at that. That's about a fourth of Egypt. It goes all the way over. It's half of Iraq. It's, a good third of Saudi Arabia and almost all of Syria, not to mention all of Jordan. And people say, oh, well, David expanded the kingdom to that degree. No, he didn't. That has never happened. But it's going to happen. You know how I know? Because God said it was. That's his promise. So we ain't even really got started yet over there. It's amazing what happens when you read the Bible. This is the promise God made to Abram in Genesis 15. And now, what's interesting and why understanding blood covenant is so important is it's where we get our marriage ceremony. There's these things we do. Well, it's the same thing in the blood covenant ceremony. When two people are entering into a covenant, a marriage is a covenant. That's why it's so destructive when they're torn apart, because you can't break a covenant. It wasn't meant to be broken. That's why these things happen. Now, thank God, there's grace. And again, what people don't understand, there's grace for us to move forward in the renewed revelation of who God truly is and what he's now promised to do as we move on in our lives. So there's no judgment. But what I'm saying is this, is these two people come together, and they're going to enter into this covenant. And they go through a series of rituals. They'll face each other, and then, or they'll start back to back, and there'll be all these dead animals split in half on both sides. And as they walk away from each other, they'll walk a figure eight around these animals, and they'll come back face to face. And what they're saying is, if I break this covenant, let this be done to me and more also. And then they go through a ring exchange. They go through all these little things is where we get our marriage ceremony. But what's interesting that I want to point out here is they both walk between the pieces. But in this particular scenario, and you can read it tonight when you go home in Genesis 15, Abraham is in the way. He's like these babies that start growing up and get in the way in the kitchen. He's wanting to help, and he means well, but there's vultures coming down, and he split all the animals, and he's running out there, and he's shooing them away, and God's like, look, I'm not going to be able to do anything with him in the way like this, so he puts him to sleep. And what's interesting is Jesus walks through the pieces, and Abram didn't. So this is what we would call a unilateral covenant. It's one-sided. Here's what else it means. In the relationship of this covenant, God subverts himself to serve. He's serving Abram. And friends, he served us when Jesus went to the cross. Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. He's a servant king. He's showing us the picture of what nobody in the world could ever understand, that the King of Kings laid down his life for us. And so to point all that out, thousands of years before it actually happened, Jesus, God the Son, moves through these pieces and establishes this covenant unilaterally. Let me back up. Now I'm going to read through this again. Let's go back up to verse 9. God said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, a young pigeon. Then he brought all these to him, cut them in two down the middle, and placed each opposite each other, but he did not cut the birds in two. So you take these animals, you cut them all in half. There's blood and guts everywhere, and that's the point. If you break this covenant, this is the judgment on you. What happens to these animals? That's what's being communicated, okay? So now when the sun was going down, well, let me back up to verse 11. When the vultures came down on the carcasses, Adam drove them away. So he's now working in this thing. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, God says to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. Do you know what happened? He obviously is talking about Egypt, right? Do you know what happened at 390 years? Moses killed the Egyptian soldier. Then he had to go away for 40 years. So if you read your New Testament, they came out at 430 years. See, we can get in the way sometimes if we're not trusting the plan of God. You'll get there, but you might be delayed because God's got a plan. And that's part of the trick, is us learning to rest in him and let him do it. So Moses, somewhere in there in his story, figured out he was the guy. He was the guy God was going to use. So he sees the Egyptian soldier beating on one of his brethren. So he goes in and he stops it because, he's the man. And then when that happens, it kicks off a chain of events that cost those very people that he was there to deliver an extra 30 years of bondage. That's just a freebie. You don't even have to pay for that tonight. It's just interesting, isn't it? So he said to Abram, verse 13, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in the land that is not theirs, and will serve them. They will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to pass, when the sun went down and was dark, and behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river Egypt to the great river Euphrates, to the Kenites, the Kenizzites, and all the Perizzites, as I said before. So this is a very powerful establishment of blood covenant, and these things can't be unwound. Even if you're a political pundit with millions of followers, who cares what your opinion is? If it's not Bible-based, if you're not spending your time in the Word, then your opinion means squat diddly, right? So now, that was the first point. I have several, but I'm going to be done on time or slightly after time. The Abrahamic covenant was declared everlasting. That was number one. Let me just give you some references so that you can look these up later, because I'm only covering a few of those verses. Just for time's sake. So write down Psalm 105, 6 through 11. Write down Ezekiel 16, 60 through 62. Write down Jeremiah 32. You'll have to look for that one. And write down Isaiah 55 and 61. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The one here. You've never been in my class, have you? I'm joking. Here we go. Psalm 105, 6 through 11. Ezekiel 16, 60 through 62. Jeremiah 32, and I'm going to give you the verse because I'm nice. Verse 40. You got that, Megan? Okay. Isaiah 55 and Isaiah 61. So 5 times. Let everything be established in the mouth of 2 or 3. So 5 times he called it an everlasting covenant. So it really doesn't matter what anybody thinks about that or feels about that. It just is what it is. Okay, Israel's failure was foreknown by God. God never entered that covenant with the idea that Israel was going to be perfect, just like he knows better about us. That's why Jesus took our place. So remember, what makes this covenant so good and so amazing is that the goodness of Jesus gets attributed to us through his blood, right? And by our faith. So when we receive that by faith, then that's accounted to us. So that's why you don't go to hell for all that you've done. You go to heaven for what Jesus did, right? That's the nature of the new covenant. So let me go to Deuteronomy 9, 4 through 6. Deuteronomy 9, 4 through 6 should be on the overhead. Do not think in your heart after the Lord your God has cast them out before you, saying, quote, because of my righteousness the Lord has brought me in to possess this land. But it was because of the wickedness of these other nations that the Lord is driving them out before you. In other words, he's saying, don't think this is about you. This is about me not liking them more than I don't like you. It is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart that you go in to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God drives them out before you, and that he may fulfill the word which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he's establishing that they have a place of prominence in this covenant, but it's not because of their actions. Like nothing we have in this thing is because we earned it or we deserved it. It's actually just the contrary, which shows how good God is. Verse 6, therefore understand that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. So if he wasn't choosing them then because they were righteous, why would he be choosing them now or rejecting them now because they're unrighteous? Ezekiel 36:22. I don't know if this is on the overhead. Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, I do not do this for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my holy name's sake, which you have profaned among the nations. Notice that he's tying what he's doing with Israel back to his name among the nations. He's showing the world. Now remember, all these people, as bad as they are, they still have an opportunity to be saved. But they're going to be saved because he started with Israel. And that was his choice. And that's what people struggle with. They can't wrap their minds around that. But let me say it this way. If God abandons Israel because of sin, then his covenant promises become conditional, and his word becomes unstable or untrustworthy. All right, number 3, we're moving right along here. If Israel's sin cancels the covenant, then no one is safe. Let's go to Romans 3:3-4. If covenant promises are based on human behavior, then the entire gospel collapses. Except if you're that guy talking about obedience on Facebook. Romans 3:3-4. For what if some did not believe? Will their unbelief make the faithfulness of God without effect? Certainly not. Indeed, let God be true, but every man a liar. As it is written, that you may be justified in your words and may overcome when you are judged. If human unfaithfulness canceled out the promises of God, then David would be disqualified, Moses would be disqualified, Peter would be disqualified, the church would be disqualified. Romans 11:29, for the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. God doesn't change his mind. If he did, nobody could trust salvation. And maybe some people don't. That's why they feel like they've got to work for it, because then it's on them. Which is even scarier and shakier. Okay, so now let's get to the name of this thing tonight. The church is warned not to boast against Israel, and you see that happening in our culture today. In Romans 11:17, I'm going to go down through 21. Listen to this. And if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them became partakers of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Remember, there are Jews that are saved, and they're going to be Jews that continue to get saved. So this isn't like, he didn't exclude those that have faith, but what he did is opened it up to us, the Gentiles, because the entire nation. And even if the entire nation would have received, remember now, then what's going to happen in the book of Revelation just would have been expedited. Then they would have been the one preaching the gospel, not people like, the Gentile people of the first, second, third centuries. So do not boast against the branches, verse 18. But if you do boast, remember that you do not support the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well said, because of unbelief they were broken off. And you stand by faith. Do not be haughty, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he may not spare you either. So Paul uses the olive tree analogy. The root is the Abrahamic covenant, which we read in Genesis 15 and 17. Started in 12. Genesis 12, Genesis 15, Genesis 17 are the particulars of that promise. The natural branches are Israel. The wild branches are the Gentiles. And the Gentiles are grafted in, not replacing the tree. And this is where, that replacement theology comes in. It's like, oh, well, God's done with them, now we're going to take it. It's just, again, if you don't understand the framework of covenant in Scripture, then I could see how you'd struggle with that, but it would also be because you're not reading the New Testament, because it's very clear in the book of Romans what Paul is saying, and in the epistles as well. He's confronting Gentile arrogance toward Israel, which was prevalent in his day, just like it is in our day. So this arrogance has led historically to replacement theology, anti-Semitism, which, we see in the Third Reich, in other places, even in our culture, persecution of Jews and Christian nation, and the general misunderstanding of the gospel around the world, even in Israel. And that's the thing. It's like people say, well, they hate Christians. Yeah, so does the Muslims. They don't understand the gospel. That's okay. We didn't understand it either for a long time. All right, so we're coming in for a landing here. I'm going to hit one more of these. Israel's hardening is temporary and purposeful. Romans 11:25. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come. So there's coming a fullness of the Gentiles. I think that will culminate, my personal opinion, is with the rapture. And then once that has happened, then Israel's going to be like, oh, wow, we missed Jesus again. And then they're going to wake up, get saved, and then they're going to start preaching the gospel. Again, people who don't believe that's how it, again, let's just go back to basic Bible knowledge. People who don't believe in a rapture in that actual 7-year period, in my opinion now, don't understand the Jewish wedding tradition, because that's exactly what's happening. And God chose the wedding vernacular, not us. He chose the husband and wife vernacular, not us. So it's a big deal for him. We are the bride of Christ. He is the bridegroom. And so in Jewish tradition, there's a whole thing that's got to happen. We're legally betrothed to him, which means we are his bride. But that wedding has not been, that union has not been consummated yet. That's going to take time. And during that time is when Israel's going to take her place on the earth. They're going to be beheaded on wholesale, but they're going to preach the gospel to every creature, and then everything's going to culminate. I think, to me, it's pretty tidy. It might not be on our timetable, but that makes sense to me in light of all the different things that happen. It's not just, people get up on Sundays and preach, and people get saved, and when they die, they go to heaven. Look, we're not looking for a hole in the ground. We're looking for one in the sky, and we got a gospel to preach. And when we understand these things, it gives us authority in carrying out this mission that God's given us. So Israel's stumbling here actually is a doorway for the Gentiles to come in a different way, in a different level of authority than would have been otherwise. So Romans 11:11, I say then, they have stumbled that they should fall. Or have they stumbled that they should fall? Certainly not. But through their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to the Gentiles. So, in other words, Israel's story is not finished. It's just sort of in the middle of it. And there's a lot to go. But the cool thing is we get to be part of a lot of it. And I think as God tarries a little bit, we're going to get to see some pretty awesome things. So are there any questions about any of that? Is that a question?
Yes. For both of us. In the Romans 11, it talks about the root, it talks about the branch, it talks about the root. So the root would be the Abrahamic covenant, Jesus himself would be the tree, and we would be the branches.
That works for me. I mean, that seems to be logical. Yeah. It doesn't, I don't think the verse says explicitly what that is, but that would certainly seem to be, reasonable. Yeah. Do we hate Muslims? No. Muslims are going to get saved. They're going to come to Christ. Um, there are many peaceful ones. I don't mean to say that that's not true, but I'm telling you, there's a pattern. And to stick our heads in the sand and then keep supporting people who say Islam's not that bad, but attack Israel because, let's talk about this real quick. We have about 360 million people in our nation. Israel has maybe 11 million. It could be that we just have similar objectives. Right? Maybe we just have common goals. Maybe it's not that Israel is controlling our government. Maybe we just want to kill the same people. Maybe we just want to save the same people. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I mean, what do I know? But let me read something else to you tonight, just since we do have a few minutes, and I'm not going to get in trouble if I go over a little bit. People say, well, Israel is this, that, or the other. We have other allies. But again, let me go back to this notion that we have like motives and we have like goals with Israel. It's not the same. Even, and I know, I'm not trying to be offensive, but even in Western Europe, these people are silly, they're not serious, and their time is short because they've opened their floodgates to the Muslims and they're going to be gone in rather short order. So let's talk about Spain real quick. They've already told our President Trump and our military that we cannot use the NATO base near Gibraltar for operations against Iran. The base controls traffic entering and leaving the Med. Spain is essentially saying we want no part in this conflict, and you cannot use NATO facilities to do it. Now, this is remarkable because we're part of NATO. Okay. NATO has repeatedly stated that Iran should not develop nuclear weapons. And in 1986, Spain did the same thing by not allowing the Reagan administration to fly over their airspace when they were going to bomb, whoever, Libya. So that was 2,500 extra miles that our fighters or our bombers had to fly just because Spain was not, this is being recorded, so I have to watch my language, but because they weren't cooperating. Let's talk about the UK for a minute. The UK restricted American use of the strategic base in Diego Garcia and said it could only be used for defensive purposes. Well, what is more defensive than bombing people who bomb our people? But this is the UK. In 1982, Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands. If you know your history, Reagan supported that fully. He was willing to replace carriers if they lost one. He gave them all kind of missiles. He whatever they needed, he was there for them. But they don't feel that way about us, and as a result, I think what we're seeing in that part of the world is, their days are numbered. Every major city, I don't know if you know this or not, but every major city in Britain is headed by a Muslim. Every major city has a Muslim mayor. Every one in England. I don't know. I have my own ideas about those people over there, and it's not good. I don't ever want to go spend my money there. Maybe Italy, because they have a conservative leader. But those people are, that'll come back around because they're going to need us to save them someday, and it's going to be too late. They won't participate in freedom. And maybe it's because they have so many leaders in their country that are Muslim that they can't say anything. That's how that works, You get so much of that pushback that you're silenced from the inside out. So anyway, that's why our allies, our real other allies, aren't involved in this, is because they don't believe in this. They don't care to vanquish evil. They want a patty cake with it, and you can see that that's the result of their country. Thanks for that question. Anybody else got a question before we close? That wasn't really a question, but neither here nor there. Okay, so tonight was the last Wednesday night in this format. You know, everything, seasons come and go, and they're always good, but new seasons are exciting as well. So we're going to take a little time over the next week or two and kind of decide that this may just turn into like bring some dinner and we pull up around a table and we just chat about the Word. It could be like an overgrown life group, or not, you know. So I know RevNet's kicking back up. I got my new camera in the mail today. So I'm getting ready to go to war on the airwaves in a different way. But anyway, so there's some things happening. We're talking about it. We want to grow this, but you guys have been faithful. So thank you for being faithful over these year and a half or whatever that we've kind of done this. We just feel like we're trying to get the life groups off the ground. We don't want to put another strain on everybody, and then also babysitters and whatnot, so we're trying to think of everything as a way of moving forward instead of just the fact that we like to do this. So anyway, Father, we thank you today for your goodness and grace, Lord. Thank you for the word. Thank you for the eternal promises of your covenant. And if one of them isn't true, then none of them can be trusted. So we thank you that we trust you explicitly and implicitly, and we thank you for leading and guiding us, Lord. Open doors of unction and opportunity for us to speak your love and life to people around us, and let it be that people would wonder what is going on in your life, that you are so excited about Jesus. And so, Father, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for our country, our presidents, our service members. Go before them, Lord, with protection and favor and wisdom for our leaders in this country. And let it be that we could get this SAVE Act through Congress. We believe it's the will of the Holy Ghost. And so we give you the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Sorry, we have a few announcements, everybody. But before we do, the goal is to start that Wednesday night expression in some capacity, the Wednesday after Easter. So from now until then, we won't have anything on Wednesday nights, and we're going to strategize and get a plan on how that looks, and then we'll kind of kick that back out. That will not be like a church-wide thing. That will be to the people that have been faithful to the Wednesday nights. Pretty much everybody in here serves in some capacity anyways. We're involved in some capacity. So it'll be, kind of our Wednesday night expression, but sitting around a table, asking questions, and just fellowshipping and having that midweek time together to strengthen one another. So that, again, will pick up Wednesday after Easter. But until then, we're building up to Easter. We got a lot going at the school. We're going to try this weekend to frame everything out if you're available, a mighty man of God, or woman if you want. No, whatever. You come out and help. But we'll be doing that this weekend. Sierra has some announcements now.
Hello, again. I'm going to, wow, my voice sounds terrible. I just really wanted to emphasize, I'm going to send this in everybody's life groups to send to your life groups. Sisters Retreat, we need a $50 deposit. It's due by March 22nd. So encourage the ladies in your groups to register for that. And then Easter, we need eggs and candy. You can tell your life groups, just put it in your Amazon cart and send it to the church. We really, really need a lot of eggs and candy. We want to bless our community, give kids as many eggs as they could ever want. So please buy eggs and candy and bring them here. We have 2 services, and then also wanted to talk about the auction. If you have a business in here, or you know somebody that has a business and would like to donate a prize to our auction, the auction is going to be probably our biggest fundraiser in opening the school. We've had amazing prizes so far. I'm really excited, but we'll also be playing bingo. So